should have been a test. Good
morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, December 20th, 2011. It's 9 a.m. We're at the Palm Coast Community Center, regularly scheduled meeting of the Palm Coast City Council. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Mayor Netz?
Here.
Vice Mayor Lewis?
Here.
Councilmember DiLorenzo?
Here.
Councilmember McGuire?
Here.
Councilmember Meeker?
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
Thank you. First item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the December 6th council meeting and the December 13th council workshop. Are there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion to approve?
I have a correction. In the December 6th minutes on item number 5, relating to the Green Development Incentive Program, it says that I said Kohl's was a lead building, but it says it's the Kohl's department store, which is KOHL. But more importantly, LEED is LEED, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design.
Oh, it's a lead building.
Right.
Mr. Mayor,
Mr. Meeker.
on the 13th, the workshop, when we were discussing the Three Sisters weir structures in the FEMA grant, the comments that are attributed to me in there are a little briefer than I recollect. My recollection was that I asked the staff to discuss with the Water Management District the option of going to 2 weirs as opposed to repairing the 3, and to see if that would have any additional requirements for permitting. And I hadn't seen anything back on that from staff, so I kind of assumed they were looking at that. But that was the issue there. There were 3 weirs. 2 of them were...
Give us an item number?
Yes, sir.
Or is it?
It was 11-409, item number 4. It was the resolution approving the pre-disaster mitigation grant for the Three Sisters. And I specifically asked about weir I-4 and I-6 because they were set at the same elevation. And I was trying to save a little bit of money and instead of repairing both of them, go to 1 weir and control the whole system upstream and downstream with 1. And I was waiting for a response back from staff on that.
Okay, with that addition, are there any other additions or corrections? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve as amended and as corrected?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 2, presentation of the Florida Planning and Zoning Association Outstanding Development Award. Mr. Landon.
Hang on one second. Please, and Bill Butler is also supposed to, thank you, Bill, I forgot who I was going to introduce. You're supposed to stand up and help me out here, sorry. Bill, take it from here.
Morning, Council, Mr. Mayor. I'm Bill Butler, City Landscape Architect, and I'd like to introduce and bring to the podium John Thompson, who's the president of the Surf Coast chapter of the Florida Planning and Zoning Association, and also Brian Matthews, our environmental specialist with the Utility Office. You can both come up. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor Netz and members of the City Council. For the record, my name is John Thompson. I am the president of the Surf Coast chapter of the Florida Planning and Zoning Association. And today, as president, I have the distinct pleasure of presenting the Outstanding Development Award for the city's Florida Water Star Demonstration Exhibit. And given that this is my 3rd year in a row presenting an award to you all, I typically would give you a quick overview about what our organization's all about, but I think I can skip that because you've heard it 2 times before. Again, Jason, I want to also recognize you because we worked together on one of our luncheon programs back in 2010, and because one of our missions is to educate and provide a networking forum for professionals, the public, and elected officials like yourself. And one of the ways we go about it is to recognize, one of the ways we go about our mission is to recognize achievement in our two county areas, and in this case, recognizing the city for this award today, and also maintaining its leadership position. I went back and looked at our awards. We've been doing this for 3 years now, and the city of Palm Coast has this distinct position of being the only local government to win 3 times in a row, and this is going to be my 4th award, the 4th award that's going to be presented to the city. No other city or local government comes close. So that says a lot about your community, and you should all give yourselves a pat on the back for that. And by the way, I would expect this to continue into future years, given your past results. Here's some highlights. I just want to go over some highlights that our awards committee pointed out to me. I'm not involved in the selection of the awards, but some things I want to point out. First thing was partnering with St. John's to pursue an agreed-upon goal, in this case, conserving water. Partnering is a big criteria and checkoff in our awards. They also like the goal of encouraging residents to change water use behaviors that result in wasteful water consumption through use of a hands-on example. That's pretty neat. And the other was coming up with the idea of using the city's utility office to obtain the greatest public exposure, knowing that customers visit the facility for water service billing matters. Good idea. So all in all, I want to congratulate you all for another well-deserved award, and you want me to go ahead and present to
the men who did the hard work.
And I want to recognize, of course, Bill Butler and Brian Matthews, and of course Denise Bevan as well for submitting the award on behalf of the city. Bill?
Thanks, John.
Thank you. And again, congratulations.
Thank you. You think after 3 times, you retire.
Well, next year, there will be a new president, so he'll probably give you the speech about who we're all about. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good to see you again, John.
For those of you who haven't visited the demonstration garden on Utility Drive, just outside the utility headquarters building, very, very nice demonstration project of how we can conserve water in Palm Coast as we do our landscaping. I would encourage everyone to take a look at it when you get the opportunity. Agenda item number 3, presentation of a check to Florida Hospital Flagler Foundation. They brought their own sharing section. Bring that check up here, don't you? Big check. Big check. On behalf of all of our residents, it's my pleasure to present this check, or I will be presenting this check, to the Florida Hospital Flagler Foundation. On October 27th, the City of Palm Coast hosted the first Pink Army 5K run through the Central Park at Town Center. The run was the first in the series of 9 races that the City of Palm Coast is hosting. Of course, ran from Central Park to Florida Hospital and back. Amazingly, for a first time out, 325 Pink Army supporters came out to battle breast cancer. Many of the participants were themselves breast cancer survivors and their families. The city was proud to donate the proceeds of $2,796.95. You think we could have gotten another 4 cents to round this up to the Florida Hospital Foundation. This donation will directly benefit women in Flagler County with screening mammograms, diagnostic studies, and education. So, without any further ado, get it this way. Get it this way.
Now you gotta turn around this way.
Get me behind me, or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Marcia's making a quick run to the back.
Hold that pose. Come on.
Once more to the breach.
Right.
In the
That's correct. I'm sure somebody wants to say a few words on behalf of the hospital.
Oh, yes. Yes. I think I'll take it directly to the bank because this is a first with the money coming this way instead of that way to the city. And I think that's awesome. My name is Tony Papandrea. I am the chairman of the Florida Hospital Foundation. And I accept this check on behalf of the hospital and the foundation. And we are grateful to the city of Palm Coast that you acknowledge what a great asset the hospital is to the people of this community. And in return, we acknowledge the leadership that you folks provide to our citizens, and we cherish this new relationship, and we'll work toward making this 5K run bigger and better in the coming years. And we would like to thank especially Lisa Gardner, who worked tirelessly to get this thing going, and the 300 and so people who ran. It was awesome to be out there and to see the enthusiasm and to see the feedback that these people had, and the barbecue at Woody's afterwards was just an event that the city needs to be proud of. And we thank you for your help and for your participation in this. And I'd like to wish everyone a blessed Merry Christmas and a prosperous, healthy 2012. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tony. Get it while it's hot. Agenda item number 4, presentation of pledge to entrepreneurs. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this one I do remember. Joe Roy is the person I'm going to introduce to present this. Our Business Assistance Center has an advisory committee that came up with this idea of not only supporting small businesses, but highlighting the entrepreneurial type spirit that many of them have, and the importance of the entrepreneur here in Palm Coast. And so there's a little presentation, and Joe, if you'll, all right, now you guys are going to, I'm all, Bo said Joe. Joe, are you saying Bo? Okay, you guys, someone take it over from here, please.
We'll show a quick video first before Joe comes up.
I am following a dream, pursuing an opportunity, taking charge of my own destiny.
I am bringing something of value to society, making a job for myself and for others, and creating wealth that benefits my family, my community, my country, my world.
I am one of a movement of millions of entrepreneurs and innovators who made America great, and who will continue to keep our economy going and growing.
I am what I am because many people have helped me along on this journey.
Therefore, I will tell my story, sharing my successes and failures so that others taking the entrepreneurial path can learn.
I will strive to mentor an aspiring entrepreneur.
I will make my voice heard by those who make policy decisions that affect me and my business.
I will appreciate and celebrate my accomplishments and the accomplishments of all my fellow entrepreneurs.
I will give back to the society that helped me to be successful.
I will build a stronger America.
We have Lisa Akinji with us this morning to accept the pledge. Office Divvy has done an incredible amount of work with the City Council as well as with the Business Assistance Center in making this come alive. And a lot of this comes back to their belief in entrepreneurship and how it can take root. A lot of what we have today, we take from the Kauffman Foundation, which is known for entrepreneurship and innovation. And I think it's a credit to what everyone here collectively has accomplished. I'd like to thank the city, and I think in what we have today, the citizens of Palm Coast can be extremely proud. Entrepreneurship is alive and well in Palm Coast. The number of businesses that I see still coming in that are excited about the opportunity, their plans are getting better, the atmosphere is getting better, and I think it's a credit to the environment that you're trying to create within the city to encourage this to go on. So I thank you.
It's my pleasure to offer this pledge on behalf of City Council and all of our citizens. Whereas the Kauffman Foundation started the entrepreneurs movement to encourage and celebrate the spirit of entrepreneurship, enlisting over 13,000 entrepreneurs pledging their support to fellow entrepreneurs. And whereas the City of Palm Coast, in order to align with this proclamation, hereby pledges to support entrepreneurs, startup, and small business owners in their efforts. And whereas the City of Palm Coast will continue to invest in infrastructure and sustainable practices that furthers the city identity as a green, progressive place to do business. And whereas the City of Palm Coast does and will welcome diversity, create a thriving business community, and establish partnerships where we leverage our relationships and resources to bring suppliers and distributors to complement the businesses that are open here. And whereas the city will provide a competitive advantage via improved bottom line that can position businesses for accelerated growth. And whereas the city will deliver an alternative to metropolitan city living with increased quality of life, reduced cost of living, and increased opportunities for employee homeownership. Now therefore, that the Mayor, City Council of the City of Palm Coast do hereby pledge to provide the support and encourage local innovators and job creators to launch startup businesses that bring ideas to life, drive economic growth, and expand human welfare. Signed this 20th day of December 2011, and it's my pleasure to sign this on behalf of the City Council. Joe, thank you for everything you do. And thank you. Want to take this?
Yes.
Great.
I'll just add one last thing, which we believe that we might in fact be first. We're not aware of another city in the country that has an entrepreneur pledge, or really internationally, so that's a big deal. And I just wanted to also say that I think on top of forming the Business Assistance Center, the launch of the annual Business Expo, and the publishing of this pledge, I think those are really significant, strong moves, and just proud to be a part of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Keep up the good work. Agenda item number 5, an ordinance amending Chapter 15 of the Code of Ordinances relating to Green Development Incentive Program. Mr. Reichman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is an ordinance of the City of Palm Coast, Florida, amending Chapter 15, Section 32, Definitions, Section 36, Standard, and Section 41, Sunset of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Palm Coast, providing for conflict, severability, codification, providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, 2 years ago, City Council adopted this ordinance that encouraged green development, new development with incentives, both by reduction in fees and expediting permitting, along with a few other benefits if developers or builders would use environmentally sound materials and methods. That ordinance sunsets the end of this year, in other words, in a couple of weeks. This ordinance really just extends the sunset for another 2 years, or extends the ordinance for another 2 years. It makes a couple of minor changes. There is a partner resolution that addresses the fees, as that resolution also was part of the sunset. So this is a second reading. You've talked about the details a couple of times already. You've seen the presentation. There have been no additional changes, no additional comments. It's ready for final action. Denise is here to answer any questions you may have regarding it.
City Council, any questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting from the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 5? Seeing no one approaching the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Vice Mayor Lewis.
Yes.
Councilmember Di Lorenzo.
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire.
Yes.
Councilmember Meeker.
Yes.
Mayor Netz.
Yes.
Mayor, this motion is passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. Agenda item number 6, resolution to co-designate Kingsway by adding Selico Way. Mr. Landon?
Mayor, City Council, this was actually a request of Councilman Meeker, and Bob has a short little presentation to show the proposal that if this resolution is adopted, what the results would be. We're doing some
Maybe he does.
technical training.
Mayor Netz, members of the council, Mr. Landon. This, whoa, am I not up there? There we go. This is the sign that we would be putting up, and this is a view of it over the intersection. It's an overhead span wire sign. There will also be post-mounted signs at the corner of Kingsway and Old Kingsway and at Royal Drive and Kingsway.
Thank you. Council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting to the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 6? Please give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Del Sordo. We actually started this whole project for the changing of Kingsway to Selico Way in honor of not only a great person, but my good friend, Frankie. I've been a resident of Palm Coast since 1982. I've been here this morning to voice my opinion about this. We wanted originally to change the road to Selico Way. He spent 360 days thereabouts per year at that location, whether he's getting coffee, hanging out, just BSing with the rest of the gang. He was more than just a cop, he was a friend. I understand that some of you don't understand the idea or the concept or don't like it because it opens up floodgates. It does not. We have a wall, we have Veterans Park, we have everything for our soldiers, men and women of the armed forces. We have nothing for fallen firefighters, nothing for fallen police officers. He is both. He's a firefighter, he was a police officer and a best friend. We should honor him the right way. Selico Way is a great idea. Okay, option 4, that was said by Mr. Lewis and Mr. Meeker, that was a great idea. Having the first eastern section of the road, Selico Way, the back section that has the other businesses of Denny's and the Grand Hong Kong, keeping that as Kingsway so it doesn't interfere with their advertisements. That was a great idea. However, it was 86th for this one. Great sign, absolutely beautiful. It's confusing. I don't know if you guys have been out there and driving around Palm Coast at all, but people can't find their own way home. You give them 2 names of the same street, they're going to be confused. Let's give them 1 name. Let's make it Selico Way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Carlos Selico. I'm the father of Sergeant Frank Selico. He worked and served the county and the city. He worked for over 11 years, at the city. On behalf of me and my wife and my other son Carmine, and the entire family, I wish to thank all the people who signed the petition on I'm voting for, and the proclamation, especially sincere thanks to Councilman Member Frank Meeker for honoring my son. I'll always be indebted forever, and I thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're deeply sorry for your loss. Next speaker.
Jack Carroll from Palm Coast. I have a question I'd like to ask. I know it doesn't sound right, but what does Sergeant Jellicoe do to merit a street named after him? Usually, somebody does something besides being a nice guy and hanging around and drinking coffee. I won't say he's bad, he's a good guy, probably, I never knew the man, but I'd like to know what he did to deserve a name on a street. I don't know if you remember, but none of you were here, I said Mr. Nets was sitting, I think you, at one time, when they had a motion to put Shirley Chisholm's name on a street. They debated it for the whole day, for about an hour and a half, set it aside and came back the next day. And then they turned it down because she didn't do anything while she was living in Palm Coast. Now here was a woman that was opened the door for black women and for most women, and she was turned down. She did something, but she was turned down. Now I want to ask, just what did Sergeant Jellicoe do to deserve a street name? And besides, we just were awarded, Charlie Wallace was awarded the Congressional Medal for an outstanding Negro performance. I don't see anybody here saying, you know, let's make a street after him. And he did something. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is John Pollinger, and I was not prepared to speak on this issue, but I must. There's nothing wrong with honoring our law enforcement officers. There's nothing wrong with honoring our public service professionals. And yes, Sergeant Jellicoe was much more than a popular person. He was a dedicated law enforcement officer who served the citizens of Palm Coast as well as the citizens of Flagler County. As evidence, if you had attended the funeral, you would have seen thousands of people who were affected by his life. He was passionate about his job, he was passionate about bicycle safety, and he was passionate about the young people in Flagler County. In fact, a foundation was formed in his name to keep that commitment that he had to serve the young people of Flagler County, one child at a time. I understand what Councilman McGuire was saying about honoring our veterans, and I would agree that capitalizing on that idea might not be such a bad thing. In my hometown back in New Jersey, we honored our veterans by naming streets after them. And we put a gold star on each of one of those streets to signify and honor the memory of our fallen veterans. As far as the Congresswoman, I think it's an excellent idea as well. And I would ask maybe the City Council and the Mayor to consider one thing. Perhaps we could have one of the neighborhoods in our community with the section with the last name of the veteran or notable persons living within the community, consider banding together on one street at a time and perhaps honoring these individuals on an individual basis. We know that all the streets in town are alphabetically listed, and some of them are in fact confusing. So I would just keep an open mind and not only pass this resolution, but also consider in the future it's another way of honoring our veterans and notable residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to City Council. Additional questions, comments, or motion?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I started this with the help of these people obviously everybody knows I go to Dunkin' Donuts on a daily basis. I used to talk to Frankie as well. He's a great guy. But more importantly to me, he was such a great guy that well over 700 people were moved to ask the city to do something special. Now, that's the first time in the amount of time I've been here that somebody has come to me with a request for somebody specific with the signatures and the petitions to make something happen. And I know that there are concerns about changing road signs and then having to update GPS units, and it makes it confusing when people are trying to find things. So I'm not interested in really opening up a floodgate of name changes. One of the reasons I offered the fourth compromise is it didn't really affect any GPS locations because there's no businesses located on that particular segment of Kingsway. Therefore, I didn't think there was going to be any impact. On the other hand, the compromise number 3 here that we're talking about is very similar to what's done throughout the United States, where we take a segment of the interstate system, for example, and dedicate a certain length of the interstate system to, I seem to remember on my way up to LaGrange, Georgia, there's a segment of one of the highways named after a military gentleman by the name of Spangler, I think Congressional Medal of Honor and all that. So it's very common to see some type of honorarium, or not, actually that's not an honorarium, but an honor given to people who have accomplished something in their local area. And certainly, you know, Frankie was a local boy and been here for a long time, and I agree with the citizens that he deserves something. And the question is, do we stay with the item number 3? I think the family's good with it. I would have preferred something else, but I'm good with it as well.
The council comments. Seeing none, is there a motion?
I'll motion to approve the agenda item.
Second. Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 7, resolution providing for collection of Old Kings Road special assessments on property tax bills. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, about 3 years ago,
excuse me,
when the council at that time agreed to establish a special assessment district for the improvements of Old Kings Road, we, because of the bond market at the time, were unable to issue bonds, and so we have a contractual agreement with property owners south of Town Center Boulevard or the canal, that area that has already been improved to 4 lanes. That agreement expires early next year, so we now have to implement the district, if you will, or come up with some other mechanism to make sure the property owners meet their obligation to reimburse the city for a majority of the cost of those street improvements. This resolution does not activate the district, assessment district, but it does give you that option to do so. There still will be discussions after we get the final numbers and the final dollars. They're very close. We'll have that in the first quarter of next year. At this time, though, you have a deadline of implementing this resolution before the end of the year in order to have the option of activating the assessment district in 2012. So this gives you that option only. It does not actually implement the district or the payments required as part of the assessment district, but it is necessary for the adoption today if you're going to have that option for you next year.
Council questions? Seeing none, I'll open the meeting to the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 7?
Charlie Erickson, Palm Coast. I think I heard during the workshop comment that Jason made. He asked the question, was this the request by Walmart to have a rural road or the city road with the sidewalks, et cetera, and other improvements? My question would be, just what is the assessment to the property owners then for the minimum that was requested, or was it for the job that the city actually approved? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll get an answer for that. Next speaker.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning, Mr. Faulkner.
For the record, my name is Charlie Faulkner, and I'd like to, I guess, make a few points and give about 2.5 minutes of history. It seems like I've been working on this road for my entire career, but in truth, it's probably 8 or 9 years. At the time the idea came about, I was senior vice president with Palm Coast Holdings, and we were in the middle of undergoing a DRI review for what we now know as Town Center. This special taxing district was originally formed with the understanding that it would be the funding mechanism to add 2 parallel lanes to the existing Old Kings Road, not rebuild the whole road. During the course of the DRI review, the traffic study that we did determined that the southern reach of the road, which is this Phase 1, was not needed by that project, or at least until trips exceeded 10,500 peak PM trips, which nobody ever expects that to happen. So as a result, you can make a strong argument Town Center shouldn't be charged at all with this assessment. The original special taxing district was comprised of lands abutting the road itself. And then the adjacent, on your map there, I don't remember the color, the JX DRI immediately to the east of the road was added. At the very last minute, in order to avoid a lawsuit being threatened by one of the affected landowners, Palm Coast, or the Town Center, added to the taxing district in excess of 200 acres to bring the overall assessment down lower and avert a lawsuit, which we were successful in doing to keep the project moving forward. If the Town Center acreage is assessed and they agree to pay, then that would entitle Town Center to corresponding mitigation credits in the amount of roughly $3.4 million as provided for in the Town Center Development Order. In summary, this is complicated, so hopefully it'll give you a little glimpse of what's to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. But first, Mr. Landon, we have a question about urban section versus rural section, what the assessment is for, and you might also comment on the necessity of the realignment of Old Kings Road.
Okay. And I'm not prepared to have the numbers unless, Chris, you have the estimates that you can provide. Those issues, as far as the actual numbers, is what the property owners are responsible for. That is what we're going to be discussing in January, February timeframe. Those were the numbers I was talking about as far as needing to bring all of those factual information to you when we are prepared to give you final numbers. The idea is that the developers or the property owners, in this case along Old Kings Road, the district is established. I need to make that real clear. This isn't establishing the district. The district is already established. It sounds like we're maneuvering as to whether or not we want to be in the district now or not, but that's already been established. And so the idea is the property owners in the district would pay for the additional lanes that would be more of the rural section, which means it wouldn't have curb and gutter sidewalks. City impact fees was paying for the balance of that, and that's why it's not a clean number of just saying, oh, this was the cost of the project. Also, utility fund is paying for some of the utility relocation, so there's a variety of funding sources. It was all part of the agreement when we implemented the project. So That is, and Mr. Faulkner is correct, though, it is going to be complicated, and that's why we need to sit down with the property owners and try to put together a proposal that everybody can live with. The district itself included the whole length from State Road 100 to Palm Coast Parkway. Obviously, that hasn't happened, which means you have people in the northern section that aren't receiving the same benefit. So there's a lot of variables, and that's why it will be a whole comprehensive discussion as far as numbers, and all that information will come out at that time. As far as the realignment, yes, one of the reasons for this Phase 1 section happening when it did was that the old Kings Road right-of-way, where it was before, kind of divided the property between I-95 and Grand Swamp right down the middle. Obviously, for a big box like a Walmart, they needed a larger piece of property, so the agreement is a realignment of a portion of the section that's already been added on as 4 lanes to create a larger parcel that could handle a Walmart store. Walmart has purchased that property, but because of the downturn in our growth and in development, they have delayed the construction of a new store at that location, so it's still vacant. Hopefully that gives you the background. It will be very complicated. I do agree with Mr. Faulkner, and there are a lot of details, and we'll bring all those to you at the appropriate time.
Okay. Additional council questions, comments? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2011X, providing for the collection of Old Kings Road special assessments on property tax bills.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 8, resolution opposing a tax exemption for online booking companies. Let me handle this one if I may. This is on our agenda, I guess, immediately because of a request from the county, but there is a much greater background information to this. Several months ago, Commissioner Melissa Holland and County Attorney Al Hadid made a presentation to the Northeast Regional Council, which is a body representing the 7 counties in Northeast Florida. The essence of the presentation was to describe the current state of affairs with regard to online, online travel companies like Expedia and so on and so forth. In a nutshell, here's what happens. A local hotel has a room that would normally rent for, and I'm going to make up numbers, $200 a night. Rooms that they don't anticipate selling, they package and sell to these online travel companies at a discounted rate, let's say $150 a night. The online travel company resells that room to their customers for $175 a night. So the online travel company makes a profit between the wholesale price that they paid and what they sold it for. Their customer perceives that they've got a discount because the room normally sells for $200 and they got it for $175. The problem arises is that the state statute requires that a variety of taxes be applied on the purchase price, in this case, $175. The online travel companies are collecting a combination of tourist development tax, special assessment tax, local sharing property tax. They're collecting these taxes, but they are only remitting to the state that portion based on the $150 that they paid. What this means is a significant lack or loss of revenue, first of all, to the tourist development councils in each county, our tourist development council being one. But it doesn't stop with the tourist development council. Flagler County has a half-cent local option sales tax that is not being remitted to the state. And we also get a portion of the regular sales tax. So there are three components of the taxation that is being collected on these rooms that is not being remitted to the state. Now, this is big business, and big business typically has very expensive lobbyists. And the online travel companies have extensively lobbied our legislators in Tallahassee, and several times thus far, the legislature has contemplated granting an exemption to online travel companies. The rationale that our legislators have used is they are opposed to any new taxes. Well, so am I, but this is not a new tax. They're collecting the money, they're simply not remitting it. Now, they're labeling that difference between the tax that they collect and the tax that they remit as a service charge. But the reality is the customer is already paying the tax. The reality is, because this is an issue for companies that are publicly traded under the Securities and Exchange Commission, they have to book this differential as a potential liability. If counties and states were to force collection, that's a liability. They've already put the money aside. The money's in their coffers just in case. What this ordinance does, what this resolution does, is pass a resolution stating that we, the City of Palm Coast, in conjunction with the 7 counties in the Northeast region and all of the other municipalities, are opposed to the granting of any exemption to an existing tax. Further, speaking on behalf of our local hotel operators, this puts your local businesses at a distinct disadvantage. They are required to collect and remit tax on the full cost of the room. When anybody gets an exemption from a portion of that tax, you are giving a special benefit to these online travel companies who are not housed in Flagler County, who are not housed in the state of Florida, they are elsewhere. So this resolution simply puts us on record as saying that we're opposed to any exemption, a special interest exemption of these taxes. So with that being said, are there any council questions?
Your Honor, assuming that we were to oppose this, what happens next?
One would hope that our legislators in Tallahassee understand how important this is to local government, and they will resist the temptation to cave in to the lobbyists.
When is this likely to be resolved?
It was, this legislation, this exemption legislation was proposed the last legislative session. It got lost in committee, it got buried in committee, and was never voted upon. The assumption is that this legislation will again rear its ugly head in Tallahassee in the legislative session starting in January, and my hope is that the sufficient number of the legislators will understand that this is not good legislation, it's not in the best interests of their state or of their local governments, and they will again reject it. Hard to tell.
Thank you.
The thing is, we're not asking for Tallahassee to do something, we're asking them to not do something. So it's hard to tell what they're going to do. Any other council questions? Let's open the meeting from the public. Anyone from the public wish to be heard on this agenda item? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Come back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
Move to accept this resolution.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Thank you very much. Agenda item number 9, approving pre-disaster mitigation grant application for 3 water control structures. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, the next item also is a similar proposal for 3 other structures.
Why don't you give us a presentation on 9 and 10 together?
Yes, we will do one presentation. You know, as you all know, stormwater or drainage system is a high priority of City Council. It's probably one of the highest priorities you hear about in the community, because when we get those 6 inches of rain like we did a couple of weeks ago, we have old infrastructure that cannot handle some of the events we have as it was designed. We're fortunate that we still do not have structural flooding, but we do have street flooding. We do have structures that are deteriorating to the point where they need to be replaced. We have a plan to do that, and then we also know that FEMA has a grant program which they call pre-disaster, in other words, before the disaster happens, trying to actually make some drainage improvements that will prevent the disaster. Some of our structures, but not all of them, qualify for that grant. And so what we are doing is attempting to expedite the capital improvement plan that we put together last year by applying for grant dollars from the federal government so that it augments our local dollars that we have set aside for this program. Mike Brennan, who is responsible for this project, is going to make a presentation. This is not just designed for City Council, but also for the community, so they know what we're trying to do when it comes to stormwater improvements. And then lastly, this is attempting to answer Mr. Meeker's question that he mentioned earlier, as far as the 3 sisters, and do we only need 1 sister, or do we need 3 sisters? And or two. And so Mike is prepared to address that and have that discussion too. So if you'll take it from here, Mike, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor, council members, Mr. Lannon, pre-disaster mitigation grants 2012 were opened up in, I believe, June of last year. They asked for letters of intent to participate. We submitted a letter by the due date on 3 projects. Of those 3 projects, 1 was determined not to qualify, and 2 others, with the assistance of state agencies, we were able to get them to qualify. They're in keeping with our 5-year goal of maintaining a safe community, and our major projects of replacing 1 per year. Of course, this kind of accelerates the program as we've lumped some of these projects together, because if you're going to ask for money, you might as well ask for a bunch of money. Right now, we have Royal Palms, which we just received it's a HG, Hazard Mitigation Grant. All these initials are kind of confusing to me. Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, and we just signed the contract on that. We should be going out to bid for that soon, for construction be finished by end of June. L1 is a Sesame, on the Sesame Waterway. We've also included L1, K1, and K6 as what we call the 3 orphans. I1, I4, and I6 are included as the 3 sisters, and I'll show you a location map on those. 3 Sisters general locations at the confluence of Ulysses North, Ulysses South, and Iroquois Waterway. We spent, this is one of these shovel-ready projects we've been working on for almost 2 years. We did a lot of time analyzing it, trying to come up with the best way to solve this problem. We did pursue a single weir idea. We considered 2 weirs. But if you look at the different water elevations, and you have to consider that these 3 structures control a very large watershed that essentially stretches from 100 to Citation Boulevard to the south, and Belterre Boulevard to I-95 to the east. You can see that at I-4 at the top there. Let me see the pointer here. I-4 at the top here has the 100-year flow is 186 cubic feet per second, and normal water level is 20 feet. I-1 is 420 cubic feet per second, normal water level is 20.5. I-6 has a normal 119 cubic feet per second, and normal water level of 21 feet. So each structure is a half a foot off from the other, for a total difference of a foot between the highest and the lowest. So if we had a single structure there, we we would have to decide, okay, what elevation do we want to set the water at? Which brings in a lot of other unintended consequences, not only environmentally wise, but utility wise. Besides the fact that if we had a single structure on this side of the canal, the only way we could probably access it would be through the I-95 right-of-way. And I don't know if FDOT would be amenable to that idea. And like I said, over the last 2 years, designs were considered and eliminated. The bridge would be required to maintain and construct a single weir. Each waterway has a different elevation and flow rate. Stilling basin before the culverts on I-95 attenuates and reduces the water velocities. You'd have to make up the capacity for 3 weirs with a single larger weir, not 75 feet away from 2 box culverts. And the amount of water coming across that weir and the velocity of that water may hazard those culverts even more. Proposed design, we did go through a permitting process. St. John's Water Management District went back and forth for over a year. First, I tried to get a permit exemption because we weren't really changing the design that much, but they told us that we were changing enough that we had to get a permit. So we went ahead and applied for the permit to get those structures built. If we decide to scrap the whole idea and go back to a single weir idea or any other change in design, we would have to withdraw our grant application, and of course that would require new permitting, which no doubt St. John's Water Management District would require us to not only do stormwater modeling for this project, but they would want a groundwater model done too, to compensate for the wetland mitigation and other utility concerns. And going on to the 3 orphans. 3 orphans are in the general vicinity. Like I said, I like to lump projects together. You have L1 at the top here, K1 at the bottom, and we have K6 over here just prior to, I believe it's Smith Trail. Now, all 6 of these projects are south of US 1, State Road 100. Any questions?
Something that might be beneficial to the folks listening. Why do you have, first of all, these are water control structures, weirs. A similar term would be dam.
Yes, sir.
Why do you have these here in the first place? Why not just let the water flow?
Well, if we let the water flow, then what we do is we drain all the wetlands, we lower the hydraulic head on our aquifers, and destroy our well fields, essentially. Then we don't have any water.
Okay, that's the point I wanted to bring out, why these are essential, not just for flood control, but in non-flood times, they play a very important role in the overall environmental picture.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Brennan, going with the flow here. This was originally presented, at least in my understanding, was if we got these grants, we could compress the time frames that we're talking about, doing a lot of renovations of our infrastructure relative to stormwater runoff. What do you envision as assuming that these are all approved and you get the grant money, how does that reduce the time frame of doing what we need to do to our city?
Well, you have to understand, some of these grants are kind of like long-term, stretching it out kind of project things. If we do get the grant, we'll probably be awarded maybe June, July of next year, and it'll probably have a 2 or 3 year completion time frame that they have to be done by. So I would expect if we did get the grants, that would put us 3 or 4 years, maybe 5 years ahead of what our current schedule is.
And are these structures ones that are evaluated by our stormwater people as being in danger of collapsing?
Well, they're essentially all 6 of them are non-functioning at this point. They have so many holes in them, they're not holding the water back, so our wetlands are being dried out, and we're not getting any water pressure on the well fields and the aquifers.
Are these structures, if you will, that were put in by ITT?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
There's your rating, the City of Palm Coast rating.
If you see the third column over is our City of Palm Coast rating, and then over here we have eligibility for FEMA funding. Those that say yes are, of course, eligible for the funding.
Just, if I could piggyback on that also, you'll also see the dates on the right side. The whole idea is that some of those we weren't anticipating even starting design or being funded whatsoever until 2015. And that because of FEMA's criteria being different than our criteria, you also have two other structures that are not on that list that FEMA has deemed as being qualified. So those are advanced even faster. They weren't even anticipated in the next 5 years. So yes, this definitely excels. And then what you can do then is the ones FEMA does not view as being qualified for their funding, Mulberry, Royal Palms, those ones up there in white, those then get bumped up for local funding sooner. We are not anticipating reducing our funding obligation to the program. We're seeing this as augmenting that funding.
Yes, sir.
Additional council question. Mr. Meeker.
Mike, if you go back to the Three Sisters, that one right there. The only reason I brought this up at the workshop was that the information that was provided to me at the workshop said that the water level at I-4 and I-6 were both controlled at the same elevation. And for that reason, I asked about removing the two weirs and going to a single weir on the other side, keeping I-1 at the same, because that I knew was at a different elevation. And if I was controlling Ulysses North and Ulysses South at a different but lower elevation, I could accomplish the same task on the other side. Now, the best argument that you came for not doing that is a bridge crossing and not having immediate access to it. So I can accept that. But at no point in time did I bring up the issue about one single weir to replace all three. I talked about one weir to replace the two.
I stand corrected then, sir.
Okay, that's it for me. Thanks.
Any other council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting to the public. Any of the public wish to be heard on either agenda item 9 or 10. We'll vote on them separately, but since they're essentially the same type of item, if you'd care to comment, you can comment on either or both. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. Additional questions or a motion on agenda item number 9 only?
I'll motion to approve agenda item 9.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries that objection. Agenda item number 10, I need a motion.
I'll motion to approve agenda item 10.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries that objection. Agenda item number 11, resolution affecting the Neighborhood Stabilization Program, potential applicant conflict of interest disclosure. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, we have a employee, a frontline employee, who has applied for the Neighborhood Stabilization Program grant, and because she is a city employee, in fact, she has other family members that are city employees, we are required to disclose that publicly, and so that is what the purpose of this item is, and Bo's going to give the details to follow the rules of the federal grant program.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. For the record, Bo Falgu, Senior Economic Development Planner, and I work on the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. In accordance with our local housing assistance plan approved and adopted by City Council and Chapter 24 in the Code of Federal Regulations, the city is disclosing the following potential conflict of interest. Applicant Nicole DiMattina and related family members Joe DiMattina and Christine DiMattina that all work for the city of Palm Coast. We're disclosing that for public comment. Also, in accordance with the previous stated provisions, the city staff and the Citizens Advisory Task Force who met on December 12th to discuss the potential conflict of interest find that no conflict of interest exists since the state individuals have no role in the decision-making process or an ability to gain inside information with regards to the NSP program, and therefore we are recommending approval of the attached resolution.
Thank you. Council questions?
I have a question, Bo. If these folks were not employed by the city of Palm Coast, would they meet the requirements if they were private citizens and not employees?
Yes, they've gone through the complete application vetting process, and this is the last step because of the potential conflict of interest. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other council questions? Open the meeting to public, and from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 11. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
I make a motion, Mr. Mayor, that we adopt the resolution. for the conflict of interest disclosure and determination.
Adopting staff recommendation that there is no conflict of interest.
Exactly.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without exception. This brings us to the consent portion of the agenda, items 12 through 17. Does any council member wish to remove any items?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, item 15.
Mr. Meeker.
Item 15, please, sir.
Item 15.
Mr. Mayor, number 12, please.
Number 12. Anyone else?
Let's see, no, Frank has that one. No,
Okay. Okay. So we've removed 12 and 15. That leaves 13, 14, 16, and 17. Is there a motion to approve that portion of consent agenda?
I'll motion to approve those items.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries that objection. Agenda item number 12, Mr. Meeker.
I'm Mr. 15.
I'm sorry.
I'm Mr. 15.
Okay. Mr. 12.
Thank you. During our discussion at workshop, I believe I heard correctly, and I just want to confirm that I heard that other incentive options are going to come back to us as part of the rate study. Is that correct?
That is correct. That's what you requested from a standpoint of if you reduce the demand for water by having low-flow devices, that it makes sense that we evaluate the impact you're going to have on the system and reduction in impact fees accordingly. That's a utility fee, not a building permit fee, so it's a separate study. And we are going to do the rate study, and we'll include that at that time. So we'll come back to you this year, or 2012.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Okay. Any other questions on agenda item number 12? Since this was removed from the consent agenda, anyone from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 12? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion meeting, come back to council. Mr. DiLorenzo, you removed it. Are you comfortable in offering a motion?
Yes, make a motion to approve agenda item number 12.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Mr. 15, Mr. Meeker.
Mr. Mayor, the reason I'm bringing this one up is I've had a constituent raise a question about whether it's appropriate for the city to be involved in something like this. Basically, the comments were like, why shouldn't we just let these small businesses fail? If the bank isn't going to loan to them, why should we be involved with it? We're in essence co-signing the loan, and that the lending institution would not feel prudent in making, and then made some comparisons to Solyndra, which everybody remembers the Solyndra thing. You know, there was $535 million in guaranteed loans out there, and 2 years later, Solyndra goes under, and the federal government's in the process of paying them back. So the questions were valid enough that I wanted to bring them before council and for some discussion. This is nowhere near the size of a Solyndra. It's taking existing funds that came from a variety of sources and combining them in a very small way to a very targeted group. And I don't think that the comparisons are correct, but nevertheless, I wanted to bring it forward for some discussion with the staff here.
Mr. Landon, could you do a brief précis on what agenda item number 15 is?
Yes, well, Bo has his presentation ready, so I think there has been enough comments. It'd probably be appropriate to have the presentation again. I would like to introduce it, though, as this isn't city staff, city employees who come up with this idea. This is a direct result of our emphasis on small businesses and helping small businesses grow one job at a time through our Business Assistance Center. And the ideas and the program is being developed by the retired business managers, executives that are helping with the program. So this is something that the private sector has recognized as important for small businesses, and they are the ones that have really put together the details and will be the ones that will evaluate applications as they come in along with city staff. So I did want to just kind of highlight that this is not the core business of local government, but because of our Business Assistance Center, we're trying very hard to bring in those retired executives to help us with this. And now Bo will give you the details. I should have stalled long enough, for you should be able to have that up and running, right? Okay.
Oh.
There you go.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. A little bit of background, I think that's important, that I probably didn't do a great job covering in our last presentation. Prior to the dissolution of Enterprise Flagler, of course, in the dissolution process, the funds that were left over had to go to a nonprofit or similar organization that would carry out economic development activities. As part of that dissolution discussion, there were several different concepts of where those assets should be divided and go to. One was, directly to the new county organization. Second was, Chamber of Commerce or the City of Palm Coast. And basically, the board of the Enterprise Flagler decided to equally distribute the assets, the cash assets, to both the city and the county for a specific purpose. During that discussion, which we did discuss with City Council, several ideas were floated to the Enterprise Flagler Board. One of them was to fund the BAC. Another was training programs. The third was the Business Expo. The Enterprise Flagler Board decided that none of those options were really in their liking, that they liked the guarantee, the loan guarantee program to help small businesses. So those funds actually come back to council with some strings attached to them. So I just want to make sure we understand that aspect of it and that history of it, because as part of their dissolution process, they are a nonprofit status. They have to make sure those funds go for uses that they dictate, and one of those was this program. Now, you do have...
Would you tell us how much money we're talking
Sure.
about?
It's $55,000, and of course, $55,000 went to the county for their economic development activities. So with that background, remembering the Enterprise Flagler dissolution, but this program was proposed, and the Enterprise Flagler Board agreed, and City Council at the time, this would be a worthy program. Basically, the background is that there's 23 million small businesses. They create the majority of new jobs in this nation. Access to capital is difficult for small business, and locally there is a need to bridge the financing gap, the acronym and the name. This comes from the expertise of Joe Roy in working with the businesses here in the BAC. Once again, Enterprise Flagler provided the city with $55,000 for this program through their dissolution process, in which those funds are restricted. And this is essentially to give another tool in the toolbox for the BAC. Loan guarantee, not direct lending, and it's only exercised if the borrower defaults. Some examples of loan guarantee programs that are positive: student loan, VA loan, FHA loan, Small Business Administration loan. Just to kind of, since Salinger was brought up, that program was a 95 or 100% loan guarantee program. I almost consider that direct lending, and you'll see the contrast in this program here. In developing this program, it wasn't my idea or me. It was definitely a group of individuals, including Joe Roy, myself, Chris Quinn, and his finance experience, and then we had 2 SCORE counselors who joined us, one who had experience in private equity lending here in the community. We developed the program concept first, and then we met with banking partners for feedback on whether that would be a program that could be successful. Some of the requirements, once again, different than the national example that Mr. Meeker stated. Only guarantee 50% of the actual loan, and the business owner must be actively involved.
Where does the other 50% come from?
That's the bank.
Okay.
And the reason...
So they've got skin in the game.
They got skin in the game. And the reason the group that met said 50% should be the max is because we wanted the bank to be in the primary driver's seat to have their money just as at risk as the city's guarantee. They must be located or will be located in Flagler County. They must be a for-profit entity, and they must be in business for at least 1 year. Most banks will require 2 or more. And they must be a client of the BAC and long-term remain an active client if they're awarded a guarantee.
Bo, before you switch, can you give me a theoretical example of that ownership issue and how this money would fit into that, that type of an example? In other words, how would we use part of this $55,000 to help out a small business? Why is the bank just providing all of the additional capital that they need?
Right. Most of these businesses that Joe sees are in need of, they have cash flow issues due to the seasonality of business. And so typically they're looking for a line of credit. And banks are, right now, as you know, the pendulum has swung from very loose lending practices to very tight lending practices. So in our discussion with the banks, really these are for, clients where the cash generally have a coverage ratio, and I'm talking in Chris's area, but they have a cash coverage ratio. Most banks right now, it's very high, say it's 150%. So whatever your income's derived, you have to be able to cover your debt service by 1.5, which is very high. Back in the day, it was 1.2. So this guarantee may, for customers that have a little bit lower coverage ratio, they have a good business model, it may free up that capital and make that bank make that decision to lend the funds.
Bo, we've talked, or we're involved with 2 local banks in this project, are we not?
3.
3, okay. And it's my understanding that the most that the city will guarantee on these is $10,000. Is that true?
Correct.
Okay, so are the banks telling you that if a small business comes to them and says, gee, I need $50,000 for capital equipment for my business, and the city will guarantee 10 of it, is that enough to put them over the top with the bank? I mean, $10,000 when you're a business owner is not a whole lot of money. In fact, it's probably not even a month's payroll for a lot of businesses.
Yeah. Typically, what the banks tell us is the most need is a line of credit for cash flow. Equipment may be a different lending product. This will not work with every typical need, but it may. And what banks will tell you is depends on the customer, their credit, their personal assets and things like that.
What happens when your $55,000 is already on the table, so to speak? What happens after that?
We won't accept any more applications. This program won't be leveraged or anything like that.
So is this a one-shot deal because we're not going to get $55,000 next year from Enterprise Flagler?
Well, the idea at some point is the guarantee would be released, and I think that's a little bit later in the presentation, but after 2 years, the guarantee would be released by the bank, and then that money can be re-guaranteed for another client.
Yeah, that help me out with that. My understanding was we have a $55,000 pot of money here that we're going to allocate out, and as the money is paid back into the system, it continues to roll through the system, but doesn't exceed $55,000 in total funds available.
Correct.
Bo, the term is being used as if we are making a loan paid back. The only thing we're saying is that if you default, then we'll lose our $10,000 if that's the amount we're talking about. So then, in that case, we're not at 55, but we're at 45. Because that's all we have is 55, and we lost 10,000.
Correct.
Your worst case scenario is that every loan that you guarantee defaults, we lose the $55,000 Enterprise Flagler gave us, and we're out of the business.
That's it.
That's your worst case, worst case.
Right, and I think your example of the other worst case is that no one ever applies for a loan. So that was something that when the group got together and then also talked to the banks, it's, once again, worst case is all your loans, all the guarantees default. The other case is no one's ever eligible to apply for the program or get a loan, so the money just kind of sits there with the purpose of helping small business. So that was kind of really the outline on which the group really looked at the what should be the guarantee amounts? How long should the guarantee be for? What should the uses of the funds be for? How do we recoup the funds if a default does occur? So that's really what they looked at in developing the program concept. And then when we went to the banks actually to confirm with them that this is something they're willing to work with, and 3 banks, Hancock, Prosperity, and Intercoastal, all said that they're willing to work with this program. Of course, it all depends on the applicant, the credit score, the personal guarantee, and all their underwriting standards that they'll go through.
But, this might be a little ahead of your presentation, I don't know, but tell me. SBA will do a loan guarantee also. And as we discussed at the workshop, they do a 3.75% of whatever the amount is. We're only charging we're charging
$100 fee.
$100, right. So it's different from what SBA is doing.
Correct.
SBA has a chance of getting percentage back. We do not. How do we respond to that?
Okay, that is later in the presentation. I'm going to fly through those last couple of slides. I think we've covered a lot of it in our questions. Eligible projects, business expansion, working capital, line of credit. Once again, this is what we're seeing in the marketplace as a need. No construction renovation, because once again, the amounts are small, and 2, the amortization time of construction or renovation projects. No business startups, too risky. Maximum guarantee, as Mr. McGuire stated, $10,000, minimum guarantee $5,000, maximum guarantee percentage of 50%. Once again, the bank has an equal risk in this project. Maximum guarantee terms of 2 years with a possible hardship extension. The person's making payments on their line of credit, using it as they're supposed to. After 2 years, we'd be released from the guarantee with the bank, and then that money can be used out once again for another client of the BAC. Guarantee fee of only $100. No, as Mr. Lewis stated, there would be no additional interest rate. And the reason we thought we want to add additional burden on the interest rate is a higher payment. And the minimal amount of money, we just, for tracking and then collecting that interest payment, it just wasn't worth the difficulty. But we did want the applicant to have, some commitment, and so that is where the $100 guarantee fee comes into play. Underwriting review. Once again, we're going to depend on the lender to conduct the underwriting review, but we will have the ability to make sure they're not doing anything that's not consistent with industry standards. And also from a public records perspective, we don't want to have all that sensitive financial information for their competitors to request from the city. So a loan review committee composed of the finance director, the community development block administrator, and a SCORE volunteer. If there's a conflict, of course, city manager could substitute a staff member if someone knows the business or has a family member. Committee would review the application consistent with the underwriting standards and the guidelines that you adopt as a city council, make final recommendations. Joe, the SBDC area manager, would serve as the applicant's advisor. And this was added from the workshop for multiple applications. Priority would be given first for City of Palm Coast businesses located or will locate in the City of Palm Coast, and then second for the number of jobs created or retained. Okay, that concludes my presentation.
Bo?
Yes, sir.
Will you just touch on the subrogation agreement and how it'll protect us, protect the program?
Sure. And whether it's a separation agreement or a letter of credit with the bank, we will have a legal document. That's something that will have to be developed on what happens in the event of a default, and that the bank use every best effort to collect not only the unguaranteed portion, the 50%, but also the guaranteed portion of the loan. Of course, lines of credit and things like that is very minimal. Also, something we've talked about is also personal guarantees. So while we may not be able to collect, we will affect their credit if they do default on our guarantee. And so they'll have some self-interest in order to pay back the guarantee.
Bo, our Business Assistance Center's been in existence for over 6 months, I believe. Can you think of any examples where, had this been in place, that it would have had a profound effect on any of the clients that we've dealt with thus far?
Sure. There is one example, and they opened using personal funds. But typically, companies want to use their funds to grow more business. So when they have capital tied up, that's their own capital or cash, it can be difficult for them to grow. So in that example, I think this program, because the business plan was excellent, the business owners had run a business similar, they just couldn't find a bank that would lend the money that they needed. So I think this program would have helped them there. I think it will also be positive in the fact that because the advertising for this program will come out, it'll bring more clients to the BAC, and typically, we get a lot of people coming in the door that are looking for loans or grants, and typically they need other help, not really loans or grants. So I think it'll be positive in that aspect as well.
With the council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting from the public. Any from the public wish to be heard on agenda item number 15?
Jack Carroll, Palm Coast. If you have 10 people to take out the loan, that would wipe out the $55,000. But that's all right, as long as they're going to guarantee return. Now, you don't have any money for the following year, because this is a 2-year loan. Now, if these people come up with a hardship case and it's granted, so that means you don't have any money for another 2 years. And now what happens now after they default? What happens with the city on default? Do we have to make up the difference from our budget money?
Have we got an answer for that? Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Come back. Mr. Landon or Bo, 55,000 is committed, and there's a hardship extension, and now you may be into 3 or 4 years with the 55 committed, and maybe a default down the line, so now you've got 45 committed. What is the city's liability? What's our exposure? What is the ultimate?
I think the way I would like to try to describe it in answering that question, this is like a grant. Enterprise Flagler gave the city a grant for a very specific purpose. Just like we're applying for a grant to build a weir, or in this case 6 weirs, you can't take those dollars and build street improvements. They have to be for that specific purpose. In this case, if the grant dollars are used up, the $55,000, let's say people do default, you don't have the grant dollars, then you don't have the money to to guarantee the next loan. The city is not obligated in any way to take local tax dollars and augment this or use local tax dollars. It is a grant fund. It's going to be a separate fund of $55,000. When it's either obligated, we no longer accept any more applications, or if, like you said, worst case scenario, if the business does not pay back and we have to pay the loan off, then the grant amount is reduced, our obligation is reduced. We don't have that to guarantee another one. It will be a separate pot of money. Like any grant program, it will not get mixed in with the rest of our tax dollars, if that's helpful in trying to describe it.
And I think it's important to understand that this program in and of itself doesn't solve our economic problems in Flagler County and Palm Coast. This is another nibble, another little bite out of the problem. It's money that was made available to us. When it's gone, it's gone. If it's gone, it's gone. In the meantime, we may have helped some businesses. We may have created a job or two. We may have retained a job or two. It's one more little tiny bite out of a big apple.
I only wish $55,000 could settle those problems, Mayor.
We'd ask you for a grant right off the bat.
That's it.
Additional council questions, comments, or a motion? Mr. Lewis.
Quick one, Bo. What is the BAC doing to acquire other grants of this type?
I think, if this program after a year or two is successful, then we can look at other funding options for the program, such as community development block grants or things like that, that if this program proves successful, it shows job creation, retention, successful loans are made, then we try to look at other options and grants to continue funding it or to, elevate the funding. But right now, it would just be a self-contained program.
Good. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Is there a motion?
First off, I'm really glad we had this discussion because it really helped clarify all this stuff. I'll be glad to make a motion to approve the agenda item now.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection. That's the end of the consent agenda. This brings us to public participation. Any from the public wish to be heard on any item not on today's agenda, please give us your name, limit your contribution to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Jack Carroll, Palm Coast. We want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you, Jack. And that was in less than 3 minutes, too. Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Bertram Hines. I have been living in Seminole Woods. Let me go over this. And I'm here just to talk about the conditions in Seminole Woods. I've been living in Seminole Woods for the past 19 years. At that time, in the early stages, we were called the Boondocks, which I don't really accept. But I do believe that we are being treated like we are living in the boondocks. For the past 3 months, we had 2 deaths through car accidents, vehicle accidents. There were 5 projects proposed, 4 accepted. The 5th, Seminole Woods, rejected. The 4th one, as far as I know, because I read in this city news, is Quail Hollow. Quite similar to Seminole Woods, as far as that project is concerned. The project is building or constructing a roadway, multi-roadway from State Road 100 to US 1. Seminole Woods, which was rejected, building the same type of project from State Road 100 to US 1. I want to know, I think the city manager did say in the papers that there's going to be a grand program that is going to happen. If and when it happens, I want to know how soon, and if we are going to be on top of, to be the first one on that list. I could go on and on and on and on and on, but I guess there's other people that would like to say something else. And one more thing. If any one of you gentlemen, city fathers, were living in Seminole Woods, you all would be upset just as we are. And we have people right here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Morning. I'm Richard Truax. I live in Seminole Woods also. The pedestrian bicycle master plan includes a little over 8 miles of sidewalk and trail for Seminole Woods. The completion of this is kind of open-ended. It extends beyond fiscal year 2015. By that point in time, we will only have 5 miles completed. The balance is unfunded per that plan. We need to seriously look at moving the timetable up a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Morning, gentlemen. My name is Vincent Taylor. I'm a resident of Palm Coast, Seminole Woods section. My building was constructed in '87. I became a resident in 1988. Now, this is a first for me, and I would like you to have some patience if I prove a little, if I play a little unorthodox. Now, as the last speaker just said, speaker before the last speaker, 3 persons were killed in the Seminole Woods section. 2 persons were killed in 3 months. I'm sorry. Now, I heard excuses coming out of City Hall saying, oh, the 15-year-old kid was wearing dark clothes. That's no excuse. Then I also heard the mayor said, Mayor Metz said, there's no money to put sidewalks in Seminole Woods. Then another excuse is there are no schools. Sidewalks are only slated for areas with schools. Now, I ride around Palm Coast pretty much, and I observe that we may not have schools per se, but we have school buses that transport our kids back and forth. And the kids have no sidewalks to walk. Sometimes they stretch across the street. You have to go at a snail's pace and give them time to get out of the street. I drive them some mornings, and the little unattended kids are squatting in the street. Now, if we had sidewalks, this would have been a lot different. So I think we should be considered, I mean, as taxpayers, like everyone else, to have some sidewalks in Seminole Woods. I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is John Vanderhoff. Last time I was here, you said there's no money in the budget for sidewalks over in Seminole Woods or anywhere else. Why can't we have all these internet cafes in the town, which is gambling. Okay, why can't we do like Hard Rock? Hard Rock gets taxed by the state. Why can't we put a tax on each machine? Put a $1,000 tax on each machine in these places, all right? That's where you could get the money from. Another way you could do it is have a thing where the fishing capital of the world. Have it where you can have a boat up to 20 feet long in your driveway. As long as it's insured, it's registered, all right? Charge them a fee of $35 or $40 per boat, all right? Town puts a sticker, gives them a sticker, they put it on. This way we know they paid the fee for the year. Could even be $75. But what it does, it creates money for the town, all right? And we need sidewalks over there. It's getting too dangerous with the traffic going through. And it should have been done a long time ago. You put new roads in there 2 years ago on Seminole Woods. You didn't put any, you could have even taken the millings back then and made a walkway or a bicycle path out of the millings when they did the roads over again. And that would have been at least something for the time. And when you're done with the millings, when you want to finally put sidewalks, at least now you have a base down to put the sidewalks in. And that's all I have to say on it.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Good morning. My name is Hetty Davis. I've lived in Seminole Woods for 23 years. I've been out there fighting for mostly everything. We were fighting back in 99, 98 to be incorporated with the city. You guys said that the city were in at State Road 100. We've had to fight for that. When we had the fires in '98, we had to fight for beautification of Seminole Woods Parkway. Now we're fighting for this, which is sidewalks. I have been fighting for sidewalks for the last 11 years. Had we had sidewalks, we would not have had the casualties that we had. I think that's atrocious. I really do, because those people did not have to die in vain had we had sidewalks. I would consider that, well, you consider that, we have sidewalks on Seminole Woods Parkway, which was, I understand, allocated by DOTS for over $8 million for Seminole Woods to have sidewalks from State Road 100 to US 1, intersectioning Citation Parkway to Sesame to Seminole Woods. We haven't seen anything. My understanding, it was supposed to be done as of 2012. No one has said anything about that in reference to the council. I would appreciate if someone would actually state whether or not the $8 million are still in fund for Seminole Woods, or did you use it up to beautify Whiteview Parkway and White Mill? Because right now, you're putting paths there. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker.
Gary Silbert from Seminole Woods. I've been down here since 2003. This section up here is beautiful. My wife and I like to ride pedal bikes. I ride motorcycles. We can't get to your bike paths from where we live in Seminole Woods because there's no bike path. My wife is scared to death to ride on Seminole Woods Parkway. So I went out, put a rack on the back of the bike, on the car, so we can throw the bikes on. We have to drive up here to ride our bikes. And it's a straight shot from where I live on Universal, straight up Seminole Woods, and I would be in the town center or in that section there by the hospital. Be beautiful. My wife will not ride on Seminole Woods. She comes up here, she runs in your marathons, she's training for the marathon that's coming up in January. She can't come up here. She has to, if I happen to have her car, she has to call me and say, would I come home and drop my car off so she can take her bike and come up and ride on the pass. It's ridiculous. It's only 1.5 miles up to the hospital from where I live. Firehouses. How many firehouses you got up here? We don't have any down there. We have one that's unmanned, and we got the airport. Well, that's not even Palm Coast. If something goes on, a plane crashes or something, and they're busy there, what do we do if there's any sparks or anything that catches? Not too long ago, we had a fire there. They didn't know what to do. They blocked us all in. Thank God the pilot of the helicopter is my neighbor, because he flew up and down with the bucket. We were safe, and it was right behind our houses. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Next speaker. On this topic or any topic. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. But first, Mr. Landon, a couple of related questions. In orders of priority, we have some sidewalks, some bike paths, some multipurpose paths that are currently funded, currently under design. Talk about priorities going forward.
Yes, Mayor. First of all, I really want to stress that the Seminole Woods Parkway path was never rejected. What we did is we have a master plan for the entire community, as people have stated. That is a capital improvement funding program. We actually were able to expedite the construction of that program by obtaining grant funds, those stimulus dollars from the federal government. We had, I believe it was 5 projects we submitted. Yes, it was 5 projects we submitted. They had funding for 4 of those 5. The fifth project was Seminole Woods. It is still planned to happen. It was a matter of not receiving grant dollars for that project. It is now on top of our list as for the next major path, and has been for the last couple of years. We have spent approximately $9 million already on paths and trails in the community during the last 5 years. At the end of next year, it's estimated we will be up close to $15 million. And that includes sidewalks on our street projects. But when it comes to sidewalks, paths, et cetera, we're about $2.5 million a year is what we have funded or will fund for the 6 years since approximately 2007. So Seminole Woods is a priority, but I must stress that right now the funding is not there. It is part of the program, but the funding is not available. It is, looking at our schedule, we are hoping to divide it into a couple different segments so that we can fund it in phases. And right now, 2012-13, we have it scheduled to start. What it means probably would be designed that year, then the following year constructed. So right now, unless there is funding that is not already available that comes forth, we're probably talking about 2015 before you'd see a path on Seminole Woods.
Okay. So I want to be clear on one thing. Projects that are currently funded are either in design or under construction. All of the grant money that has been available to us is already committed.
Yes.
Based on our priority list.
Yes.
Let us suppose that tomorrow, in its infinite wisdom, our federal government through DOT makes available another block of money, another grant for which we're eligible. What would be the next project in line for that new grant money?
Seminole Woods, we already have the agreement with the state, DOT. We have the, what they call the LAP agreement, local
Agency
assistance. We already have the agreement with DOT for Seminole Woods. It just doesn't have funding. It's the only project that we have an agreement with the state. So it is considered to be the next priority.
Questions about $8 million that is allocated, was allocated. I'm not sure I understood the question, but what is that $8 million?
The $8 million that was allocated.
The second to last speaker said there was $8 million available for 2012 sidewalks in Seminole Woods.
That is, those are the grant dollars total. You know, with that, we have, I mean, I could try to go down the list, but, you know, some of them have already been named, but you have Palm Harbor, Whiteview, White Mill, Belle Terre, all the way from basically Cypress Point Parkway, where it had the dead-end sidewalk on the east side, all the way to US 1, so it does go south of 100. We have done East Hampton. You know, our streets, when we build the streets, whether that's Belle Terre North or Old Kings Road, we put sidewalks on those projects. That's where that $8 million, but it's actually a total of closer to $15 million over the 6-year period.
There was a final, not a final, but one of the intermediary comments was alternative sources of funding. A tax, a fee on internet cafes, which in that gentleman's opinion is gambling, and in my opinion it's gambling also. I will say that I have asked and continued to ask and spoken in front of our legislative delegation, asking our legislators in Tallahassee to either tell us that it's gambling and therefore is illegal, or if in some twist of the wrist it's legal, then it ought to be taxed and it ought to be regulated. So I would support that as a source, a potential source of revenue. Unfortunately, the city of Palm Coast can't do that on its own. We need action from Tallahassee. I would encourage everybody, whether or not you have an interest in Seminole Woods, sidewalks or not, I think our legislators in Tallahassee need to bite the bullet, accept the fact that these things exist, regulate them, and tax them appropriately. With tongue kind of in cheek, I always talk about our prejudicial taxing. We tax the Seminole Indians pretty substantially for their casinos. Why aren't we taxing the internet cafes? As far as a fee for boats in the driveway, we've already had an opinion from the city attorney that that would not be constitutional. Did I miss any issues that the public raised? Mr. Lewis?
Yes, there's one issue that we haven't talked about, and that's the one that several people have spoken to. Why has it taken so long to get to Seminole Woods? The city has been in existence since 2000, and the program started several years afterwards, and much of the improvements have been done in the northern part of the city as opposed to the southern part of the city. Why wasn't there a mix where some things could be done in the south and in the north, and perhaps by doing that, you might have gotten to Seminole Woods as opposed to putting Seminole Woods on the bottom of the list? I think that was the gist of the conversation I was getting.
Okay.
So I don't know if we responded to that or not.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. There was a huge need when we became a city, because when Palm Coast was originally designed and built by ITT, it was all about the automobile and virtually no sidewalks. And so when we became a city, then this became one of the additional benefits the city offered the community. And then it became a matter of priorities. And, you know, the first really multi-purpose path, you had things that were along a street, was probably Pine Lakes Parkway. And that was very popular, and then we kind of went from there. A couple others that looking at my list here, Rimfire, we built Royal Palms. All of these came from requests from residents. We still get requests from residents saying, how come not on my street? And then it was just a matter of setting priorities. The one gentleman or one of the speakers was correct in the fact that connecting kids in their neighborhoods to the schools and the parks was part of the priorities. The amount of population in an area was part of the priority, in other words, the number of users. It is just impossible to do them all at one time, and so we have each year been making progress. If city council sets those priorities, but I can assure Seminole Woods people that there are a lot of emails, a lot of pressure from other areas saying, where is my sidewalk, where is my path? And there has been ever since we started this program, and about almost 10 years ago.
And as Mr. McGuire correctly noted, also a lot of pressure, don't you dare raise my taxes. Mr. Meeker.
I guess I want to see exactly how much trouble I can get myself into on this one.
That's never been a limit.
Typically not. Mr. Landon, the financing, the check writers, I should say, for the Matanzas Woods interchange, is it strictly DOT in the county on that?
As far as
the construction of that project, ultimately the construction.
Yes, when you say DOT, because it's a federal highway, I-95, there are federal dollars involved in it that flow through the DOT, but with that understanding, it's DOT/federal. There may be some county dollars, they very likely are city impact fee dollars that they will use, that they are holding.
Well, there's my question. One of our, and this is where I get into trouble, one of the recurring discussions that we've had is amount of money that has been set aside for transportation impact fees that is being held by the county right now, where we feel we have needs within the city that we could use that money.
Yes.
On specific projects. And I'm wondering if it would be worth a letter to the county administrator and the county commission to ask them to free up $1.5 million, if we're assuming it's $250,000 per linear mile of bike path in that area, free up $1.25 million or $1.5 million of those dollars, for needed safety concerns in the Seminole Woods area, and let's get going. And
There's two problems that we'd have to address. First of all, would a bike path constitute an appropriate usage of those impact fee dollars? And that's something
I do not know
don't
the answer to that, I'm afraid.
Can somebody take a look at that and get back with us?
It is definitely, that's why we call them a multi-purpose path, because it's definitely considered to be transportation network. So, yes, we can definitely look into that option.
The second concern or the issue that we'd have to deal with is there is an interlocal agreement in writing, on paper, between the city of Palm Coast and the county that identifies which are eligible projects within the city for the expenditure of that money. I don't know whether Seminole Woods is on that list, and if it is not, we would need the county's approval to amend or modify that interlocal agreement. The bigger issue, though, is all the streets identified, as Mr. Meeker points out, are in need. The county is holding that money. The county is obligated to spend that money on those projects, or preferably return the money to the city so that we can spend it on the projects. But right now, the money is just sitting in escrow, doing no one any good.
Yeah, we're talking $5-6 million, I believe is a figure. So probably the most prudent thing to do would be for city council to develop a priority list for those dollars. And you don't want to just do one project at a time. You need to look at priorities and then present that to the county and say, this is, because those are impact fee dollars that are supposed to be spent on transportation, and they are supposed to be spent in a timely manner to, benefit the transportation system in Palm Coast. So
It may be that the list that is out there right now was appropriate at the time, but might need to be superseded for the new times.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I'll comment on that under on council comments, because we had an issue last night on, anyway.
If city council would like, if you give us direction, we will work on bringing the list, there was that dedicated list, and maybe some other projects that are already in the pipeline and path projects, and let you take a look at it and see if we can't get some of those dollars that are supposedly sitting just in the bank, working here in the community.
Mr. Di Lorenzo.
Generally, impact fees have a 7-year time frame on them, with some extensions available, and with the calculation being based on a first in, first out kind of basis. So I'm not really familiar with how long those dollars have been there. But.
My opinion, too long. I don't know exactly how long, but I do think that they have been, it's getting close to 7 years. But the whole idea is that we have other projects, Palm Harbor, the realigning the 90-degree curve, those type of projects are on the shelf, almost ready to go. But those would be for your consideration of a combination. But
Your Honor.
Let me see if I can offer some clarification on this issue. Once upon a time, there was no such thing as Palm Coast, but there were impact fees. And Flagler County collected impact fees from all the development that was going on in Flagler County, the majority of which was in what was called Palm Coast, even though we weren't a city. Those monies were collected by the county, put into a county-wide pot of money, and were spent at the county's discretion county-wide. Then came the issue of, wait a minute, you're collecting the vast majority of these dollars from an area called Palm Coast. That money ought to be spent locally. So the county was divided into two halves, East and West County, and money collected in the east was going to be allocated to the east side. So it was restricted somewhat. Then the city of Palm Coast incorporated. And we said, now that we are a city, any monies collected in Palm Coast should be used by the city of Palm Coast exclusively for the benefits of Palm Coast. For, I believe, the first 2 years that we were a city, we were in a startup mode. We didn't have the staff, the wherewithal to do those impact fee collections. So for the first, I believe, 2 years, the county collected that money and segregated it for the use of Palm Coast. I believe it's about $5 million, which is a mixture of Palm Coast only and East Flagler dollars. But there is this pot of money, There is an interlocal agreement that says it will be used for the following projects, and they're listed by name. The county has already used the $5 million for construction of
Matanzas Woods Overpass.
Woods Overpass. But that money, which was spent, Jason, I think this is to your point, was fully reimbursed by the Department of Transportation. So the pot of money was replenished, if you will. So the county, I suppose, would argue that, yes, they've spent the money within the timeline, but the money has been completely replaced, and that money is still there, still held by the county, and still for these specified projects. Three-part issue. One, do we wish to approach the county and say it's time to turn these dollars loose? Two, we want to look at that list of eligible projects and perhaps modify it. And then three, if you do modify that list to include other alternative projects, you still need to prioritize them so that you're spending the $4 or $5 million properly. Now, in the county's defense, they're holding the $5 million with the thought that they're going to need it, they may need it, they possibly will want to use it for the Matanzas Woods interchange, which we understand is also fully funded, but who knows? So, it's a complex issue. Council, I don't know, but I think it's time we address this issue with our friends at the county.
Your Honor, we haven't talked about one other thing that I think we could do now, I hope, and that is the speed limit on some of those roads going through Seminole Woods. Has our law enforcement entity rendered an opinion on whether or not the speed limit on Seminole Woods and Sesame and some of those streets is what it should be? And should there be a different speed limit at night as opposed to days? Because I haven't heard any comments in that area.
I can address that. It's actually not law enforcement, although that is part of it, as far as if there are unusual accidents, et cetera. But it's traffic engineer, it's actually a traffic study that is conducted. It has to do with a variety of variables that they use. I have asked our traffic engineer to do that study on Sesame as a request from one of the residents out there. And we have not done it on Seminole Woods, but Seminole Woods 4-lane divided is 45, I believe. Is it 55?
It's 55.
If it's 55, we need to do that too. 4-lane divided 45, if you go any lower than that, people are just going to speed. But we can take a look at Seminole Woods too. I think that would be a good idea, and have them look at making sure that the current situation matches with the speed limit. And I'll have them do Seminole Woods also, and do it different for the 4-lane versus a 2-lane area too.
And Jim, would they render an opinion on whether or not the speed limit should be any different at night as opposed to the daytime?
I have not seen that. Other than on highways in some states, they will do that. I mean, I can ask them, but that, as soon as you start confusing motorists, it actually sometimes causes more problems when you give them those kind of options. I would say that would be highly unusual, but I can plug that in.
We have a traffic engineer. Why don't we, at our next workshop, get kind of a generic discussion about speed limits,
Okay.
what the criteria are, what the options are?
Probably can have it, because that won't be until almost mid-January. We probably can have this at that time.
Okay. This brings us to discussion by city council of matters not on the agenda.
I just shot my bolt.
Okay. Mr. Lewis?
Pass.
Mr. Di Lorenzo?
No.
Mr. 15, I'm sorry, Mr. Meeker?
Yep, got one. Maybe two. Jim, I noticed that they've at least removed the dead palm at the Players Club, but there's still some other items. Are we continuing to work on the cleanup of the fallen over trees and stuff like that at the Old Palm Coast Players Club?
Yes, it's, last I heard they were working on it, but Nestor, you have an update on it? Looks like Nestor has an update for you.
Oh, okay.
don't have a day-to-day, an update for today, but we have current cases, active cases with timelines laid out for expectations. At the next meeting, I can provide a good update, a more...
Great. I mean, it's just that, it's that eastern entrance into the city that I'm always kind of concerned about, and I want to make sure, even though it's, under private ownership and closed down, that it at least reflects the character and expectations of the citizens.
It's a critical area. It's been a hard nut for us, though.
Great, thanks, Nestor. One last thing then, and that is, Jim, is the staff or the Sheriff's Department working together to come up with some of the data that we've requested on the red light cameras, more specific data on the type of accidents that happen at specific given intersections, as opposed to, we know that we've seen declines in the number of tickets issued there, but I'd like to make sure that, like, one type of accident hasn't gone up while every other kind of accident has gone down, and that's reflecting in the data that we're getting.
Yes, and that's scheduled to come to you in January.
Great.
When we talk about red light cameras again.
Great, thanks. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. And lastly, I'd like to report on a meeting last night with the County Commission. Without going into excruciatingly boring detail, the county wished to accelerate the sunsetting, the expiration, the closeout, if you will, of the Hammock Dunes development of regional impact. This was of interest to the city of Palm Coast because among the developer obligations were a potential widening of the Hammock Dunes Bridge when and if it reached a certain level of traffic, the four-laning of Palm Harbor Parkway from Clubhouse Drive to Florida Park Drive, including the two bridges, when and if it reached a certain level of traffic, and some unspecified intersection improvements on Palm Coast Parkway. The county's desire was to close out this development of regional impact as quickly as possible, because their concern was that in the upcoming legislative session, the legislators might do as they've done in the past and extend the DRIs for some period of time into the future. The concern is that the developers in the Hammock Dunes area have expressed a desire to do more development, build more buildings, add more units. The residents over there didn't want it, don't want it, and in fact probably are correct in not wanting what at least one of the initial proposals was. At City Council's consensus, I went last night with our traffic engineer, with Mrs. Reichman, with Sarah Lockhart from our planning department, and the position we took was basically, we don't oppose what you're doing, but because we didn't get the final draft of this information until Friday evening or Monday morning of the Monday that you're having this meeting, we would like an opportunity to discuss those obligations that are peculiar to Palm Coast. There was a lot of testimony presented last night, essentially saying that none of the traffic level triggers that would have required those improvements in Palm Coast were met, and therefore we would not be affected. I took the position that over the years they have scaled down the size of that development of regional impact. It was originally approved for 6,000 units and they only built 3,000. My argument was that there should have been a proportionate reduction in the traffic trigger on the Palm Coast components. They didn't agree. So in a 5-0 vote last night, the County Commission voted to terminate the development of regional impact, the Hammock Dunes development of regional impact, declaring it essentially built out. And what that means is whatever you may have heard in the past about the Hammock Dunes developer having an obligation to do something with the bridge or do something with Palm Harbor Parkway, that as of last night has gone away. So the obligation there rests with us.
Mr. Mayor, was there any money held back?
The county did sequester money from the developer, from the Admiral Corporation, and from the community, the Dunes Community Development District, a substantial pot of money for future improvements that the county will be making on the barrier island. So, yeah, they did sequester some money for themselves, but I guess we're not part of the regional impact. So, that's all I have. Discussion by city attorney of matters not on the agenda.
Well, I guess this would go under the category of let's give it one more try. We have had one discussion about the pending litigation of Mayfield versus City of Palm Coast. We didn't finish, and we tried to continue that a couple weeks ago, and there was additional information that was still being acquired and worked on to make that a productive discussion. That information is now available, and so as your city attorney, I am requesting pursuant to Chapter 286 for, indeed, the rescheduling of that continuation of that attorney-client session, specifically for January 10th of next year at 11:30, which is our first workshop, and will be our next workshop. And again, as you all may remember, there was some additional information that we felt would be appropriate and prudent to share with you to allow your decision to be more productive. That is now available. There's also been some legal developments, as some of you or all of you are aware, that may also be relevant to your consideration in our discussion. So that is my request.
By council concurrence, we'll schedule a attorney-client session for January 10th, 11:30 at our workshop.
A year from now?
No. Well, yeah, sounds that way.
Is that
Yes,
it?
Mr. Reichman?
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Discussion by city manager of matters not on the agenda.
To follow up on the mayor's report, we have, at the direction of city council, we took steps to challenge the action of the county commissioners from a standpoint of the impact on Palm Coast. We intend to continue to ask our attorneys to pursue that. Unless you tell me differently, we will keep you updated because it was just happening yesterday. Not sure what our options are. This is very, very unusual. I've talked to professionals, attorneys, and everybody says that this whole process was extremely unusual, so I'm not sure that there is real clear legal avenues to attempt to have the obligation to Palm Coast that was contractual obligation in 1999 fulfilled. But we'll ask our attorneys to look at options, and they have taken the necessary steps to give us that ability to challenge in the future if we so choose. So that's where we're headed. Also, a couple other schedule items. Obviously, with the holidays, that really changes schedules as usual. Your workshop for next week is canceled, and in the business meeting on January 3rd, we don't have any items, so that one is also canceled. So that's a little holiday gift, I guess. So we'll be back regular schedule on January 10th workshop, and then January 17th, the second scheduled meeting in January is a business meeting. Also, always like to remind the public that we have recycling opportunities after the holidays. January 7th is our annual Christmas tree recycling program on Utility Drive, at the end of Utility Drive there at the fuel depot. We also, this year, will accept other items such as electronics. You get those phones, instead of throwing them in the trash, bring them on down. We'll recycle those. We've added styrofoam to this, and gift wrapping. So that big bag of gift wrapping, don't put it on the curb, bring it on down with your Christmas tree January 7th, and we'll take all those to recycle those. And Virginia, there's something that tells me you asked me to remind them on something. Am I missing something that, or is that just?
I think it was just the January 3rd cancellation.
Okay, all right. And then, so with that, obviously wishing everybody Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. So,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis?
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.